Karen Johnson was born on the 25th of January, 1967, in Galesburg, Illinois. She had been adopted as a baby, along with 4 siblings, by Gary and Carol Johnson. From an early age, Karen was athletic. She ran track in high school, winning numerous trophies in 5K races. That passion for running stayed with her throughout her life. Years later, she'd finished 22nd out of all the women running the St. Jude Marathon, a placement that qualified her for the elite Boston Marathon. Karen was a personal trainer at the YMCA in Dyersburg, where her boss, Randy Butler, would later say she did wonderful things for both the organization and the people she trained. She taught aerobics classes, cleaned houses, and did landscaping to supplement her income. She also sold Avon and Tupperware in the neighborhood. Everyone who knew her spoke of her warmth. Her nurturing energy was impossible to miss. On the 23rd of September, 1989, Karen married David Swift. The couple would go on to have 4 children together: Preston, Dustin, Ashley, and Keely. For the first years of their marriage, life seemed stable, but beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. In 2000, the couple divorced after David had an affair that produced a child. They remarried that same year. Friends later said it was a pattern that would define their relationship: separations, reconciliations, and David's need for control. Karen's friend Kathy Boner would testify that David was constantly watching, listening, and belittling Karen. He'd call her mobile phone relentlessly. On one occasion, he called 25 times in just under 30 minutes. In the months leading up to her death, Karen underwent a transformation. She became more independent, more social, more confident. She joined a new circle of friends at the Farms Golf Club in Dyersburg and started going out frequently. For those who knew her well, it was as though Karen was emerging from years in what they described as a controlling relationship. David saw it differently. He claimed Karen was having a midlife crisis. He told police she had started drinking heavily and partying with new friends. He painted her as someone who had lost her way. Karen's daughter, Ashley, noticed the change too. She tearfully pleaded with her mother to stay home more often. But Karen had made a decision. On the 10th of October, 2011, exactly 20 days before she vanished, Karen filed for divorce. She sought half the house, primary custody of all 4 children, and child support of $1,400 per month. David's monthly income was listed as $8,500. Karen also obtained a second mobile phone from her friends Bill and Kathy Boner. The purpose was to communicate privately with her divorce attorney, Jason Creasy. She'd learnt that David was monitoring her communications. On the morning of the 29th of October, the day before she disappeared, David asked Karen to skip a Halloween party that evening and have dinner with him instead. As her attorney said, Karen's response was clear. "No, David. It's over." Saturday evening, the 29th of October, 2011. The Farms Golf Club in Dyersburg was hosting a Halloween party. Karen attended as the guest of Bill and Kathy Boner, wearing a tight black Catwoman costume. Multiple witnesses said she seemed unlike herself that night. Her friend, Jenny Gurian, recalled Karen saying she wasn't having a good time. This was unusual for someone typically known as the life of the party. Karen had altercations with more than one woman at the party, including the daughter of a prominent man in the community. Around 11:58 p.m., she left the party with the bonus and went to their home, where she'd planned to spend the night. But shortly after midnight, Karen received a call from her 9-year-old daughter, Ashley. She wasn't feeling well at a sleepover and wanted to be picked up. Karen drove to collect her daughter and returned home to the family residence on Willie Johnson Road at approximately 1:30 to 2 a.m. David later told investigators he stayed up to make sure his wife and daughter got home safely. He briefly spoke with Karen before she and Ashley went to bed together in the same room. It was 2:08 a.m. when Karen's phone connected to the home Wi-Fi. At 4:38 a.m., her phone disconnected from the Wi-Fi for the last time. At 5:04 a.m., the phone left the house and moved to what investigators would later call an area of interest. Just 5 minutes later, all mobile phone activity stopped permanently. The next morning, Karen's daughter woke up in a different room. Her mother was gone. David claimed he woke around 10 a.m. to find Karen missing, but something critical had already happened. At 9:55 a.m., someone had used Karen's secret phone to call its voicemail. The device was connected to the Swift family's home Wi-Fi at the time. This was before the phones had been found, before anyone officially knew Karen was missing. Assistant District Attorney Tim Box would later tell the jury, "We know there was one adult in the Swift home at 9:55 in the morning." Late that morning, 2 hunters discovered Karen's white 2004 Nissan Murano on Millsfield Highway, less than a mile from her home. The doors were locked. Her Halloween costume was inside. Her purse was missing. The right front tire was completely shredded. A screw had been inserted at a perfect 90-degree angle into the tread. One of Karen's friends spotted the car and called the sheriff before David did. Both of Karen's mobile phones were found approximately 400 to 500 feet from the Swift home, smashed and damaged near a neighbor's property. The bonus reported Karen missing. David called the police after they did. The Dyer County Sheriff's Office launched an extensive search. Officers, K-9 units, Tennessee Highway Patrol strike teams, helicopters, and rescue squads combed the area around the Swift home and where the vehicle had been found. More than 300 volunteers joined the effort. The Nevada First Lady, Dawn Gibbons, whose son had gone to school with Karen, came out to search the Truckee River. On the 10th of November, searchers specifically examined an area around Bledsoe Cemetery. They found nothing. But during November, 3 separate witnesses reported seeing a man with a metal detector in the cemetery area. Karen's son, Dustin, testified he encountered this man. The man claimed to be searching for a lost watch, but Dustin noticed the man was already wearing a watch. This prominent man was never adequately investigated. Then, 10 days after Karen's disappearance, someone broke into the farm's golf club. Only one thing was stolen: the security cameras. These cameras would have contained footage from the Halloween party, showing Karen's altercations and who was present. Saturday, the 10th of December, 2011. 42 days after Karen vanished. About 7 miles from where she was last seen, a cemetery caretaker discovered a body concealed beneath a tangle of kudzu vines and vegetation. It was near Bledsoe Cemetery, off Harness Road, approximately 3 miles from the Swift home, just 20 feet from the road. Sheriff Jeff Box said the body had been concealed by undergrowth and vegetation for some time. The following day, the Shelby County Medical Examiner's Office identified the remains through dental records. It was Karen Swift. The autopsy revealed Karen had died from blunt force trauma to the head. A complex skull fracture affected her frontal and temporal lobes, extending from one side of her skull to the other. The likely weapon, a hammer or similar object. The fatal injury came from striking the front of her head. Karen was found wearing only black underwear pulled down around her thighs. Advanced decomposition and partial skeletonization made it impossible to determine if she'd been sexually assaulted. There were no defensive wounds, suggesting Karen never had time to raise her hands to protect herself. It was evidence of a surprise attack. The toxicology report showed no illegal drugs and no alcohol in her system. Only traces of caffeine, paracetamol, and diphenhydramine, a sleep aid. The manner of death was ruled a homicide. Interestingly, the medical examiner initially told prosecutors Karen had been stomped, that the force had caved her skull in. Later, he changed his opinion. At trial, many aspects led to inconclusive determinations due to decomposition. He couldn't rule out strangulation preceding the head trauma. The skull injury might have occurred post-mortem. The Swift home was searched at least 3 times by teams from the Dyer County Sheriff's Office and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's Violent Crimes Response Team. Forensic agents swept the home, garage, and vehicles. They found no blood, no signs of struggle, no forensic evidence linking anyone to the crime. 7 gallons of bleach were photographed outside the Swift garage during a search. Prosecutors theorized David used the bleach to clean up blood after killing Karen in the garage. David's explanation: the bleach was for cleaning up vomit from the family dog, which had been poisoned by a neighbor, John Hogshooter. The TBI never collected the bleach as evidence. They never tested it. A neighbor, Hogshooter, later testified to detecting a strong chemical smell emanating from the direction of the Swift home in the days after Karen disappeared. No evidence was collected to support this claim. DNA analysis of Karen's underwear revealed no male DNA. Fingernail clippings contained only Karen's own DNA. 4 sets of fingerprints were recovered from her vehicle. In 2018, 7 years after the murder, David Swift's prints were finally submitted for comparison. None matched. No other suspect's prints were ever submitted for comparison. A tire technology expert, Gary Bolden, testified about the screw found puncturing Karen's tire. It was positioned at a perfect 90-degree angle, perpendicular to the tread. The screw head was flush with the inner rubber tube. Bolden stated, "The rubber does not mushroom around the screw as if it were forced. It went straight in." He concluded the odds of a screw lodging in this precise orientation from normal road debris were highly improbable. The screw had been manually inserted. The tire had been driven less than a mile before going completely flat, roughly the distance from the Swift home to where the vehicle was abandoned. The prosecution's theory: David deliberately sabotaged the tire to stage an abduction. A forensic engineer for the defense, Brian Darr, countered that road debris could potentially cause such damage, though he acknowledged it would be unusual. From the earliest days, David Swift emerged as the primary person of interest. In 2012, Sheriff Jeff Box said, "We have been able to rule out several persons of interest except the victim's spouse." Chief Investigator Terry McCrate found David's behavior uncooperative and suspicious. McCrate noted David has never assisted us in searching for her, never offered help, has never even called to ask about the status of the case. When interviewed, David seemed fixated on criticizing Karen's lifestyle rather than expressing concern for her whereabouts. McCrate said, "That was just a sign to me that this guy is hiding something. He's covering something up." Friends testified about David's controlling behavior. Kathy Boner said David would call Karen repeatedly, roughly 25 times in just under 30 minutes in one instance. He was always there. He always knew where she was, watching, listening, making little remarks. "Oh, you're drinking too much." Very belittling constantly. When Karen visited friends, David would appear uninvited, demanding she come home. Jennifer Guerin testified about an occasion when David showed up uninvited at Applebee's whilst Karen was having dinner with friends. Neighbor Janie Helm testified that David asked to use her garden to spy on the bonus. He had a restraining order preventing him from being on their property. Amanda MacArthur described an incident where Karen noticed David's car in a parking lot after running an errand. It frightened Karen, as she realized his surveillance was real. David repeatedly characterized Karen as having a midlife crisis. He accused her friends of corrupting her with alcohol and parties. He made specific allegations against the bonus, that they hosted new hot tub parties, that they engaged in swinging, that Bill Boner tried to rape Karen, and that he'd found Karen naked David in bed with Kathy Boner. The bonus denied all allegations. Bill stated he threw a towel over her when he found Karen without clothes after a hot tub session. Kathy explained Karen came into the bedroom to lie down, but Kathy was already dressed in her pajamas. TBI Special Agent Joel Wade testified that David searched dating websites approximately 280 times between the 10th of October, when Karen filed for divorce, and the 14th of November, 2011, when authorities seized his laptop. David was actively browsing dating sites from the day Karen filed for divorce, throughout the period when she was missing, and during the search efforts. The judge ultimately ruled this evidence inadmissible, determining it could confuse the jury without proving murder. But there was more damaging digital evidence. David told investigators he didn't know about Karen's second phone. Yet, when authorities examined his work phone, the secret phone's number was programmed into it. At 9:55 a.m. on the 30th of October, someone accessed the secret phone's voicemail whilst the device was connected to the Swift family's home Wi-Fi. This was hours after Karen disappeared, before the phones were found, and whilst only one adult, David, was confirmed to be in the home. David was photographed using crutches and wore a knee brace. The defense argued this injury made the prosecution's theory physically impossible, but witness testimony contradicted this. On the 29th of October, the day before Karen died, a neighbour testified David helped move hay bales, each weighing 65 pounds, without using crutches, though he'd needed them when borrowing hay earlier. Kathy Boner testified she saw David hopping on and off a quad bike despite his claimed injury. Neighbour John Hogshooter testified he watched David talking to another neighbour whilst using crutches. When the neighbour went inside, David stopped using them. A physical therapist who treated David testified that whilst the injury limited function, David could still drag 125 pounds of weight, approximately 75 feet. This was more than sufficient to move Karen's body 20 feet from the road to where it was found. The therapist noted David wouldn't be able to pick up weight of 100 pounds or more without assistance, but dragging was possible, though it would cause pain. John Hogshooter, the Swifts' neighbour across Harness Road, was arrested on the 5th of November 2011 for aggravated animal cruelty. He'd allegedly poisoned 2 neighbourhood dogs, including one belonging to the Swifts, just weeks before Karen's disappearance. Karen's vehicle was found abandoned directly across from his home. Hogshooter's property and vehicle were searched. No evidence connected him to Karen's death. He was cleared. He later testified the dog poisoning was accidental, related to fly killer he'd placed outside due to construction materials on his property. The most intriguing alternative suspect was the unidentified man with the metal detector. 3 separate witnesses, including Karen's son Dustin, reported encountering him near Bledsoe Cemetery. Dustin testified that when told Karen was missing, the man seemed unconcerned. Private investigator Heather Cohen identified this person as potentially the owner of the farm's golf club. She noted his daughter was one of the women Karen had altercations with at the Halloween party. Cohen alleged law enforcement wouldn't even take statements from witnesses about this man. She claimed there may have been a cover-up to protect a prominent community member. Private investigator Heather Cohen developed a controversial theory. Karen had become involved in a Dyersburg swinger network, possibly performing sex work for a prominent polyamorous couple in the area. Friends reported Karen confided she was involved in something she wasn't proud of, for money, and that she'd had risky pictures taken with other girls for money. Karen's best friend, Erin Gray, provided information to Cohen. She said Karen had got herself in a mess and she didn't know how to get out of it, but that it had nothing to do with her husband. Gray revealed Karen was having an affair with a married man. Someone had given Karen $10,000 to help with the divorce. This raised questions about romantic entanglements and financial arrangements that may have put Karen in danger. Cohen published a book titled Swift Injustice: The Murder of Karen Swift, alleging a significant cover-up and obstruction of justice. She claimed the investigation opened a Pandora's box, uncovering efforts to protect powerful community members. More than 11 years after Karen's death, on the 8th of August, 2022, David Swift was arrested in Birmingham, Alabama, where he'd moved and remarried. A Dyer County grand jury indicted him on a charge of first-degree premeditated murder. Sheriff Box called Karen's mother, Carol, immediately after the arrest. Box had promised her that one day justice would be served. "We had a very emotional conversation," Box said. "She just wants justice for her daughter." David posted $200,000 bond and returned to his Alabama residence. In July 2023, whilst out on bond, David was arrested for felony stalking of his second wife, Kelly Essman, from whom he'd separated. Jefferson County, Alabama authorities found footage of David at Essman's residence in the middle of the night. Essman told ABC's 2020, "He had to drive 40 minutes one way to get to my house." She'd met David on the dating site Christian Mingle in 2014, 3 years after Karen's death. They married in May 2016. Essman said, "I look at how easily I talked to David and believed everything that he told me." The stalking charges resulted in David's bond being revoked. He was held in Dyer County Jail awaiting trial. The jury was blocked from hearing about the stalking charges during the murder trial. The trial began on the 28th of May, 2024, in Dresden, Tennessee. Judge Mark Hayes granted a change of venue from Dyer County due to extensive publicity. 8 days of trial. Prosecutors Danny Goodman and Tim Box faced defense attorney Daniel Taylor. 36 prosecution witnesses testified. The defense called only 12 witnesses. The prosecution acknowledged immediately in opening statements that jurors would hear no DNA evidence, no fingerprints, no ballistics, only circumstantial evidence of motive, means, and opportunity. The prosecution's theory: David killed Karen in the garage sometime between 2:08 a.m. and 5:04 a.m. on the 30th of October. He cleaned the scene with bleach, drove her body to the cemetery, sabotaged her tire, drove her vehicle to stage an abandoned car, destroyed both phones, then used the knee injury as an alibi. Prosecutor Goodman said this rejection was eating at David. He began to understand that Karen was truly leaving him, and this time, it's forever. The defense argued there was no proof to support the state's theory. David's knee injury made it physically difficult to attack his wife. The defense called witnesses, including 2 of David and Karen's children, Ashley and Dustin. Ashley Swift, one of David and Karen's daughters, became a crucial defense witness. She directly contradicted the prosecution's timeline. Ashley testified it was her mother, not her father, who moved her to a different room that night. "I will go to my grave knowing that it was my mother," she stated emphatically. She heard no struggle between her parents. The home appeared normal. She described her father as a supportive parent who helped her change the oil in her car, got her first job, and once paid for another family's groceries so their children could have a good Christmas. Dustin Swift also told the court he didn't notice anything unusual at the house or garage after his mother's disappearance. Closing arguments were completed. The jury began deliberations. One juror was called in separately that morning, admitting to conducting an internet search on the term reasonable doubt. This is prohibited. By noon on the 6th of June, the jury reported they were deadlocked. Judge Hayes instructed them to continue. Just after 1 p.m., after approximately 11 total hours of deliberation, the jury announced their verdict. Not guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. Not guilty of second-degree murder. not guilty of attempted first-degree murder, not guilty of attempted second-degree murder. Hung jury on voluntary manslaughter. Judge Hayes declared a mistrial on the manslaughter charge. David Swift remained in custody whilst prosecutors decided whether to retry him. On the 20th of June, 2024, a Dyer County grand jury re-indicted David on charges of voluntary manslaughter and aggravated assault. The language was intended to toll the statute of limitations. The defense immediately challenged the re-indictment, arguing the statute of limitations for voluntary manslaughter had expired. It's a Class B felony carrying an 8-year limit, which had expired before the original 2022 indictment. On the 17th of March, 2025, Circuit Judge Mark Hayes ruled in the defense's favour. He found the statute of limitations had passed. Prosecutors had failed to commence the case within the acceptable period. The voluntary manslaughter charge was dismissed. David Swift was ordered released from custody, subject to outstanding warrants in Alabama for stalking charges. District Attorney Goodman immediately filed an appeal, stating he would do everything I can to encourage the Attorney General's office to appeal the dismissal. Karen's 4 children lost their mother at ages ranging from 7 to 18. They spent more than a decade watching their father investigated, arrested, tried, and ultimately freed. Karen's mother, Carol Johnson, endured 11 years of uncertainty before seeing David arrested, only to watch him acquitted. In 2014, she told the media, "It still hurts every day. To know that somebody took my baby, killed her, took her down to the kudzu and threw her out like a rag doll. Just breaks my heart." Karen's father, Gary, died in 2018 without seeing resolution in his daughter's murder. Karen Swift's murder remains officially unsolved. No other suspects have been charged. The murder weapon has never been found. Karen's purse remains missing. The mystery of who called the secret phone's voicemail from inside the home remains unanswered. Who accessed Karen's secret phone voicemail at 9:55 a.m. on the 30th of October from inside the Swift home? If it was David, why check the voicemail on a phone he claimed not to know existed? If it wasn't David, who else had access to the home and knowledge of the phone? What caused the strong chemical smell multiple neighbours reported from the Swift home in the days after Karen disappeared? Why wasn't the 7 gallons of bleach collected and tested? Who was the man with the metal detector? Why was he searching that specific remote location in November? Why did he claim to be looking for a watch he was already wearing? Why did law enforcement apparently decline to take statements about him? Why were the country club security cameras never recovered? What was the mess Karen told her best friend Erin Gray she was in that had nothing to do with her husband? Who gave Karen $10,000 for the divorce? What caused Karen's altercations with multiple women at the Halloween party? Could these conflicts have led to violence? How did searchers miss Karen's body during the 10th of November search of the cemetery area, only for it to appear there a month later? Was the body placed between searches, or was the search inadequate? If David Swift didn't kill Karen, who did? And perhaps that's all anyone can say about the Halloween murder of Karen Swift, a case that, more than 13 years later, remains shrouded in questions, divided loyalties, and the haunting absence of closure.